What's up everyone, I'm Will from Hollywood Multipass, and after years of waiting and anticipation, the Final Fantasy VII Remake is finally here. The first part anyway. They're releasing it in parts, so this is part one of the trilogy, maybe? Anyway, this is part one of the remake. I played the game, I beat the game, and now I'm going to review the game.
Halt! Hands up!
Have fun.
I'm here for you, to help take the load off your shoulders.
So, what's our next move, boss?
That's easy enough.
Are you okay?
I'm fine.
Here, this is for you.
A flower?
Can you bear to see the planet suffer, Cloud?
Just to be clear, these are my opinions based on my experience with the game. A month ago, before this came out, they released a demo that had the opening bombing sequence from the original game. And it was so beautiful that I almost got teary-eyed. It was very emotional to see that classic level redone so wonderfully. But how does the rest of the actual full game play out? Alright, let's start with the stuff they did great on. Final Fantasy VII Remake looks gorgeous, and compared to the original game which came out in the 90s on the PlayStation 1, how could it not? Seeing the characters we've known and loved for 20 plus years finally back on a modern console is just incredible. Many fans waited for years and years to relive this game again, myself included, to see those memorable scenes, to fight those epic boss battles, to view the familiar landscapes and cityscapes we have burned into our retro memories. To experience these things again from a new and updated perspective was everything we hoped and dreamed for. The music is faithfully restored and remade to feel even more epic with a full-on orchestra of sound. They outdid themselves when it comes to the music. All of it. I would gladly buy this soundtrack in stores. I have no hesitation whatsoever in giving the soundtrack a buy. The composer Nobuo Uematsu is a musical genius and an absolute legend. They even have game discs you can collect throughout the game with different versions of the songs you love. Something definitely worth listening to in-game. The special fighting abilities and limit breaks and summons for Cloud and the rest of the group look amazing. And it feels absolutely awesome when you hit a boss with those moves that feel so familiar with the old game. There's a new upgrade system for the weapons, which is particularly cool because now if you want to use the Buster Sword as seen on the cover and everything else for Cloud, you essentially could without it being too weak of a weapon compared to your new ones, or any other weapon you find aesthetically pleasing. Interactions between characters is something I greatly enjoyed. I loved their dialogue between each other, and there was quite a few moments I genuinely laughed because the comedy was well timed, or actually feeling a heartfelt moment between certain characters. Even the random townspeople who you can eavesdrop on having conversations with each other was a nice touch. This is in big thanks to the voice actors and their performances. Thank you for bringing these characters to life. In the original game, there was no voice work. It was all text reading, which was fine for the time. They really pushed the boundaries of what the first PlayStation could do, and had to tell the story on 3 discs back in the day. This game is pretty much the story arc told in that first disc, the Midgar section. Characters like Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge are a lot more fleshed out and developed than they were in the original. I actually found myself caring about them as main characters to the story instead of seeing them as side characters, as they were portrayed in the original. Especially Jessie, who was given quite an interesting backstory and an enjoyable main story mission, which gave her more dimension and motivations for her actions. These type of additions to the story I did not mind at all. I love the development of the main character Cloud Strife. He starts as a brooding, cold, go-it-alone mercenary for hire, and as the story progresses you see that hard shell slowly chip away for him, and to be more open to people, and to have warmer interactions with others. Not too warm though, but just enough to be a little friendlier than he was initially. The addition of new characters was welcomed as well, and when you're only going to focus on the first game disc, which wasn't that long to begin with, I can totally forgive a few additions and deviations from the original story. Now this leads me to the bad stuff. Because this game is based on just the first game disc of the original game, there's a ton of filler, and I mean a ton. You really feel like they were stretching this game out just so it could be longer, and it definitely shows. When you try to pass underneath rubble or squeeze through a small passage, it really takes its sweet time to pass through it. And after a while it becomes a chore. It wouldn't be so bad if it's just a few times, but it happens quite a lot throughout the game. There are times in this game when they actually force you to walk. Yes, they force you to slow down and walk, not run, towards your objective. The action button to turn on switches and to talk to people was also dragged out. Some doors and switches you have to hold the button for a short time in order to activate it. And I found when talking to people it took way too long to load into conversations. Like this particular instance. Waiting. Waiting. Looking around. Unsure what's going on. There we go. That really happened to me. Sure, sometimes it's an instant action, but most times it took a little too long to activate. They made levels from the original longer, and at first it was fine. But by the end I felt like I just want to get this over with already. And every moment I felt something was going to happen, I predicted they would make me do some ridiculous stuff before I could continue with the main story. And I was right. Big example of this is Hojo's lab section. Everything starts building towards the climax, and then it gets deflated by this nuisance. There's a serious lack of enough monsters to fight in this game, especially to level up, which was most likely by design. They probably didn't want you to level up too much before you get to the end. But I for one love going back and fighting monsters to level up and gain levels, even if it's just for a few levels. But again, with all the filler, it was a real chore to go back and fight monsters and exit the area to go back and fight again, hoping that's enough to level up once. They added side quests for you to do in this game which didn't exist previously in the original, which for myself, who absolutely loves side quests, thought, I'm going to love this. I love doing side quests in games like The Witcher or Skyrim. In those games in particular, the side quests added an extra story element and sometimes felt like their own adventures that would yield great stories in themselves, or at the very least get some great gear or weapons. Not in this game. In this, you're asked to do ridiculous and boring tasks which add absolutely nothing to your character or to the world around you. Things like, go find some kids hiding somewhere, or kill some rats for me, or find my missing cats. Yes, that's right, you're asked to find some cats. This would be forgivable if there were some other side quest that leads somewhere, or give you something substantial to hold on to. But they don't give you that, it's mostly fetch quests. This was a missed opportunity to further flesh out other characters by helping them on a side quest. Maybe even have them join you on a hunt or something, someone like Biggs or Wedge, or even more, Jesse. Instead of boring, bland characters that don't really add anything at all to the story and you don't really care for. The side quests do build Cloud's character a bit, but you'd get that with the main story quest anyway, so... All this is unnecessary filler. By the time I got to the last chunk of side quests towards the end, I was absolutely over it. I didn't want to do it anymore. And the way the story plays out before they give you them makes no sense for you to actually do them when there's something far more important to do. In terms of the main story, that is. But like a fool, I did them, and none of it was rewarding. You do fight a cool mini-boss in one of the last ones, but because of all the slog and bore and repetition it takes to get to him, I found myself not really caring as much as I wanted to. And it was easy to beat, which didn't give me enough time to really enjoy it, oddly enough for all the filler in this game. There's also times you revisit certain areas again, especially in those side quests, and it just gets boring, and dull, and repetitive. The music certainly helps numb the pain because I love the soundtrack so much, but not enough for me to forget that I'm doing the same thing over and over again, in a place I've already gone through. Sure, going back to previous locations happens a lot in Final Fantasy games. I get that. And I love that in most prior installments, but this one felt like too much to get through, which I shouldn't be feeling for a game I've been waiting years to play. If you want to know how to make your game feel longer than it actually is and really stretch out the gameplay, then take all your lessons from this game. Then there's the combat, which was fun and fine, but certainly has flaws. When you cast Blizzaga, the ice spell, or even certain abilities, you fire at the enemy's location at the time. But sometimes they move, and apparently you can't follow their movements for some dumb reason. And your spell or ability is cast in an empty space that previously had an enemy. You just wasted your shot at critical damage. This is mostly dumb because other abilities do lock onto their targets, and the fire spell and lightning spell feel like they lock on and follow their targets perfectly. Some of the characters' other abilities also act this way. And there's cutscenes in the middle of the boss fights, which hinder your progress within said battle. Which sucks when you've saved your best move for the most damage, and the game essentially says, no, you can't hurt any more than we want you to, and it cuts off my damage progress. This got really annoying really quick. This is definitely nitpicking, but I only mention it because of everything else wrong in this game. Essentially what I'm saying is this game has hints of greatness with a ton of nonsense in between. I did finish the game and I felt a lot of these criticisms while I was playing it for the first time. So this isn't me being over analytical after the fact. And I usually love going back to familiar places and facing old enemies and seeing how much stronger my characters developed and how easy the fights are compared to when I first started. But this game isn't long enough for that. It took me about 40 hours to finish this game with all the side quests, and most of the mini games completed. Except the dumb pull-up challenge one. I hated that one so much. The Witcher Wild Hunt took me close to 130 hours to beat the main game, beat the DLC, and get all the achievements. And you know what's crazy? I can still go back and discover new locations and take on new monster contracts in the Blood and Wine DLC. There's still more to do after all I did. Now that game is a masterpiece in gameplay and storytelling. And you're telling me they couldn't fit all the original game in one game? With all its needless filler, I have my doubts. I won't spoil it here, which is ridiculous to say about an over 20-year-old game, but the ending was absolutely horrible. They turned Final Fantasy VII into Kingdom Hearts, and I hated it so much. And the way they introduced Sephiroth, the main villain, was dumb. If I remember correctly, in the original, he was teased in the first disc brilliantly, but you didn't get to see him till the second disc. But his presence was definitely felt and very ominous. And when you do get to see him, you get an origin to his evil in a beautifully told flashback that affects all the characters involved in that scene. In this, he's in your face all the time. Like they're saying, hey, look who it is. Remember this guy? Yeah, I remember, but why are you showing him to me now? And how he's dealt with at the end was just so completely unnecessary, and it belittled him as a villain. Also, the whispers essentially represent the fans of the original story. Not very subtle with that, Square Enix. I did not appreciate it. Especially after waiting all these years and being told a faithful remake. And look, for the most part it is. Like 65% faithful, 25% filler, and that last 10% of absolute garbage that doesn't belong in Final Fantasy VII. They made it so they could do whatever they want to in the next chapter, without the fans telling them that they can't. And I don't trust them to deliver a better story at all. Just look at great original stories ruined by their current storytellers who thought they could do better. Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, comic books, Alien, Predator, Terminator, the list goes on and on. Was that too Hollywood for you? Okay, then how about this? The guy who's in charge of the convoluted and complicated story of Kingdom Hearts, which is a story aimed at children somehow, is now in charge of Final Fantasy VII. And you trust him to tell a better story than what they already told over 20 years ago? The story that already worked for so many fans? That left a gaming legacy for which many called for an updated remake? On top of that, a new story from the people who failed to stick the landing in terms of storytelling for the past 15 or so years with each latest Final Fantasy and Square Enix? Nah man, I notice patterns and all I see is bad writing and even worse storytelling. I wanted them to expand the lore of the original, new characters, new journeys, some changes sure, maybe, just maybe, make things a little simpler and easier to digest than the original, which was a bit complicated towards the end, but I did grasp most of it, but it definitely needed some smoothing over. And it left a legacy for over 20 years, so you can't argue with that. I didn't want or ask for, let's make things more complicated and be so meta like we have been for the past 15 years as a company. Now I understand completely that fans shouldn't be entitled to certain things. That's fair. But creators aren't entitled to say that old story sucks and my new vision is way better than what worked before. And my new vision should be viewed as a genius masterpiece. Also, I'm going to bank on your nostalgia so I can call my failures a success. We as fans just want you to be faithful and respect what came before. That's all. But apparently, that's too much to ask for these days. Also, the franchises that split their fan bases like Star Wars and Star Trek, and undoubtedly this as well, never told better stories than what came before. Ever. And they turned the fans against each other in many heated arguments. Is that what Square Enix wanted with this game?
Does it make sense? No. Ladies and gentlemen of this supposed jury, it does not make sense. If Chewbacca lives on Endor, you must acquit. The defense rests.
There's still other flaws in this game in terms of subverting your expectations and what they presented to you, but I feel like I covered most of it. I had to take off my nostalgia goggles to see this game for what it really is. A cash grab reboot, which is heartbreaking. I don't have it in my heart to say this is a pass, because there are beautiful moments in this game that were well worth the wait. But the boring and dumb moments, especially that ending, broke me and left a really bad taste in my mouth, and raised a lot of big and glaring red flags, meaning this can't be a buy either. So unfortunately, I have to give this game a rent, which I never thought I would do or even consider telling people to pass on it. So rent it and decide for yourself if you like how it all plays out. When I pre-ordered the game, I fully expected to replay it over and over again. It looked amazing. And since it has PlayStation exclusive rights for 1 year, I planned on buying it again for my Xbox when it came out on that, and I'm sure it'll release on PC and Switch as well. But nope, that's not happening. I can't even bring myself to go back and play this for a second time. I haven't been this disappointed since the last season of Game of Thrones or The Last Jedi, franchises that set themselves up for something that they never followed through on. They never respected what they themselves set up for their own stories. This should have been a home run, a slam dunk, a guaranteed success, but you blew it, Square Enix.
You blew it!
And now I'm not going to buy the next chapter until I know exactly what happens. Storylines beat for beat, which is not how you're supposed to play or buy video games, but I just don't trust them. They're going to mess this up. I want to be wrong. God, I want to be wrong so bad. Please believe me. But all the signs are pointing to more disappointment in the future. If you love this game, you are totally entitled to that opinion, and I totally see why you would. There are a lot of great moments in this game. A lot of great moments I've been waiting years to see. But I have to judge this as a whole game experience, and the first in what I hope is just a trilogy, and doesn't go off the rails with offshoot games, which seems possible now, and that really bothers me. When you split the game in half with people who both love and hate the game, that division to me is a product failure. But there's still a chance they could turn it all around. I'm really hoping they do. I want to be wrong when the next one comes out, but who even knows when that will be? A few years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? We just don't know. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. And that's my honest review. Have you played the remake? What are your thoughts on the ending? Did you enjoy it? Do you want me to make a spoiler video being more in-depth? I genuinely want to know your thoughts on this one, because this one bothers me so much. I need someone to tell me everything's going to be okay and give me some hope. Thank you for watching. Please like and share the video and subscribe for more reviews coming soon on Hollywood Multipass.